Charles, we're here again.
We are, Brian.
In very special times, because I don't know about you, but I didn't expect to wake up on Saturday morning with the news that there had been an attack on Iran.
Yeah.
And as I said in the news yesterday, I sighed because I thought, my goodness, here we are with another round of conflict and violence unleashed on the world stage. And I was having a cup of tea as I had a look at some of this online, but shortly afterwards I was out on the street and I met some of my neighbours, and without prompting, two of them sort of said, "Oh, the news is terrible, isn't it?" And it had clearly had an effect on them.
Yeah.
So we live in serious times.
We really do. I mean, I suppose we have to sort of prefix the conversation by saying that no matter how quickly we edit and publish this, it will be out of date by the time it goes out. You know, we're talking a few days after an event which, exactly like you describe, has shocked me, and in a way, I sort of asked myself why, because this has happened with such a degree of regularity over every decade of my life, certainly, that in some senses I feel that we shouldn't really be shocked by it. And yet I'm pleased on a human level to consider not only that I am personally shocked by it, but like you described, that other people are, because at the heart of really all of this is the humanity of it, and that never gets questioned. The idea on the very fundamental level that on the sort of media line, I mean, and coming from the man himself, that because Donald Trump became somewhat impatient, he decided that it was appropriate to kill a lot of people in Iran and trigger a chain of events that may yet result in the deaths of tens of thousands, if not more people. And I think we have to start with that, because it is an extraordinarily serious business. And I've just been listening to some of what the Prime Minister was saying in the House of Commons yesterday, and I guess we should. Today is recording is Tuesday the 3rd of March, and I think we do have to sort of state that, because obviously things are going to move presumably very quickly. But there we have Keir Starmer having very obviously, perhaps not actively, but absolutely through the infrastructure that the United Kingdom has at its disposal, we have undoubtedly facilitated what has gone on. And yet there he is making mealy-mouthed excuses about not taking part in this, that and the other, in a way trying to distance himself from something that I think he must acknowledge is absolutely going to stick in the craw of the vast majority of people.
Well, I think that's why he used that bizarre, he made that bizarre statement talking about defensive action.
Exactly.
That was respect to Akrotiri and Cyprus, I think. But
yes.
we're involved in defensive action.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I have a laptop here, which I felt the need, because this morning I just found an article. It's from Politico. Mm-hmm. And the headline is, Starmer signals clear break with Trump on Iran. Mm. And then it's talking about Starmer, who initially resisted involvement in this past weekend's US-Israeli strikes, but later granted Washington limited access to British air bases, said he didn't believe in regime change from the skies. Mm. He insisted he won't get involved in offensive strikes in the Middle East, saying the 2003 Iraq conflict had taught the UK not to engage in unlawful wars without viable plans. Mm. Well, if that Politico quote is accurate, there is the Prime Minister admitting that the 2003 war in Iraq was unlawful. Mm-hmm. And then I say, fine, Mr. Starmer, when are you convening whatever's necessary, the public inquiry to bring the people who committed the crime to book? And the other thing is that he then says unlawful, it won't get involved in unlawful wars without a valid plan. So now we've got another level of madness, because he's suggesting that even though it's unlawful, if you have the right plan, you can still get involved.
Okay. Yeah.
Is he off his head, or
Well, I'm afraid, like the rest of them, he is. I think, and it's going to be very hard to know what to make of anything that anyone says. I think in these sort of early days. I mean, probably at any stage, really. But that is. I mean, I think those are two very, very significant points worth not just making now, but worth inquiring after. You know, how are those to be qualified?
Yeah.
And who is going to do that? And the thing is that already, I mean, as I say, having looked at a little bit of what he said in the House of Commons on Monday the 2nd, he is already invoking and exploiting the supposed vulnerability of our armed forces because there was a strike on Akrotiri. Now, you know, I think it might be worth asking, are we absolutely certain that whatever it was that did hit Akrotiri came from Iran? Because, of course, there is no more effective way to bring the United Kingdom into line than by presenting a threat of that kind, which enables Starmer to sort of cover his backside by talking about, you know, the necessary defence of our personnel and all the rest of it. But no, I mean, the enormous sort of spectrum of language that's used and euphemistic language being used, you know, talking about, like you say, the bit that I picked up on, you know, saying that they're wanting to distance themselves from regime change in favour of a negotiated settlement, you know, and that kind of thing, and then talking about Iran, accusing Iran now of destabilising activity around the region. I mean, you know, all these sorts of things that that completely put to one side the initial action, and to hear Starmer again talking about Iran lashing out at countries in the region that did not attack them, in the same way, of course, that Israel and the United States attacked Iran without having been attacked themselves. And yet somehow there's always this implicit truth that for the United States or for Israel to strike first is absolutely fine. Yeah. I mean, where does that come from? And why is that not political suicide to speak out on that note? It's absolutely insane that we can have been conditioned to the point where we really do think that that's okay, when it's really
well,
not.
Happily we don't.
No, well, we don't.
People,
no, but you know what I mean.
Many people do. But I think that Starmer's language, he's having such difficulty when he's actually talking to camera about this issue, because he does not have any clear thoughts in his head. He is not driving reaction or driving policy. He's constantly acting. I believe that Starmer is just a controlled puppet. I think this is becoming ever clear. And so it's difficult for him to talk because he's not thinking what's in his head,
no, indeed.
X, Y, and Z. He's thinking, if I say this, is it the right thing for my masters and the audience? And that's a very tricky. And this is why he makes such crazy statements.
And I think that was very clear with I mean, John Healey was in exactly the same position. It's a bit like those sort of like actors having been called to audition to rehearse one particular scene and then suddenly at the last minute having another thing chucked in front of them and they have absolutely no idea how to respond because they do not know the answer. Yeah. So the sort of the floundering around in front of Laura Kuenssberg is completely genuine because he doesn't actually know what he's supposed to say. No. He hasn't been briefed on that. They don't have a line for that. And that's what it is. It's a line. And one thinks of what Dominic Cummings, you know, you've played the clip of Dominic Cummings on the news talking about the theatre of cabinet meetings and how actually, you know, all the outcomes are decided before the meeting. The meeting's really just for show, and the you know, strings of power are absolutely not held there, and all the rest of it. I mean, a lot more of this I think is coming into the public consciousness in a mainstream sense, which I think is really important. But it still does beg the question, you know, for the majority of the population. Well, I mean, who is controlling this, that, and the other? And I mean, what sort of faith are we supposed to have in whoever it is making decisions that make any sort of sense? Because I think the other, you know, the other point to this, if we consider, and I mean, in many ways, I hope that I would be wrong in imagining this, but given what has happened, the way in which it's been framed, it is very hard to see that this is not going to lead to more and more entanglement of the United Kingdom, but particularly of our armed forces, getting sort of mired in this conflict. And as that process unfolds, we then have to look back at the last 4 years of handing all of our kit and most of our training resources to Ukraine. So I'm not at all suggesting that we need to be able to respond to the so-called Iranian threat. We should absolutely be having nothing to do with it. But what I'm saying is that if we're going to talk about the vulnerability of service personnel, well, yeah, absolutely, there's going to be vulnerability, because if we are then committed in the way that seems likely to a conflict, well, what chance have we? Because
are we properly equipped?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is a point being very well made by a podcast I was listening to with Douglas McGregor speaking, who obviously has made a lot of sense on a lot of issues over the years. And this is exactly his point. So just
sorry to cut in, Charles. You were specifically talking about UK there, but to emphasize the point, there are a number of respected commentators at the moment saying one of the problems that the Americans have already got in two days into this problem in Iran is there are concerns about ammunition supply. And in particular, what are they talking about? They're talking about air defense missiles. And so it's been pointed out that Trump has spoken about this by saying, well, across the globe, we've got sufficient weapons. And what he's actually saying is, well, the weapons are out there, but they're all dispersed. The Japanese have got some. We've sent some to Ukraine. But now we've got an American fleet which is going to try and defeat multiple attacks of very cheap weapons using very expensive missiles. So in the background, it appears that even the Americans are a little bit concerned about their weapon stocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
This shows you what actually the conflict in Ukraine has done to the Western military preparedness, but also demonstrates a complete failure of our. I hesitate to say this because I know many people say we don't want a military-industrial complex, but we're talking about the military.
Yes.
And if you can't produce the weapons, you can't fight.
Yeah, this is it, yeah.
It's madness, the situation we've got to on the back of Ukraine. And I see that in the last few weeks, there's been another announcement of 500 million, I think it was 200,000 rounds of artillery shells, but also air defense missile systems in order to help Ukraine defend against drones. And we're saying, in Akrotiri, we haven't got any defense systems. For example.
And we can't hope to shoot everything down.
Particularly if you haven't got the weapon to do
exactly,
it.
I know. But I think, and I think, for anyone who might be tuning into either this or sort of looking at UK column for the first time, and I think it's a really important point to make, is that we are in absolutely no way advocating for any sort of escalation or any involvement of British forces or frankly any other in this conflict. I mean, that's not the point of this discussion, but the point that exactly like you quite rightly make is that here we have Western nations, Western states coming out in effect saying that they're prepared for conflict and are actively seeking it. And yes, at exactly the same time, they have more or less completely prevented themselves from doing so effectively by what they have done in Ukraine specifically, but not exclusively. I mean, I think the two sides of the Atlantic are certainly in different states. But, as we've talked about in previous episodes of Military Matters, the British Armed Forces base, as it were, is a shell of, what on earth, what sort of effect can we expect to deliver, especially at the same time as we're, obviously the focus of today's conversation really is going to be Iran and what may happen there. But we have to look at it in the bigger context of what has happened with regard to Ukraine at the same time as we're talking about committing men to that region.
Yeah.
You know, how would that work? We've gone from a period of being able to run 2 medium-sized theatres of operations concurrently, albeit in a very stretched manner. But I mean, times have changed since then quite drastically. We have not nearly as many bodies, not nearly as much kit. We've outsourced, or at least, as I say, provided, you know, through Op Interflex. I mean, our focus for training has been on training Ukrainian troops, not our own. We are, I would say, you know, if you're taking at face value the situation as it's presented, as in this is being controlled by government, by the Ministry of Defence to a certain extent, which obviously we're not necessarily saying is the case, but nonetheless, if that's what they're presenting, what are they on? You know, none of it makes sense at all. Why on earth would you be thinking about committing anything to a conflict in the Middle East? But you know, so that's one side of it. I mean, I think the other side is just which we should deal with. We've talked about euphemism, but just the barefaced lies, really, talking about having had no part in the operations.
Yeah.
Well, if somebody can explain to me whether or not they would have been able to do what they did without the use of Lakenheath, for example, where you know, aircraft that were involved in those strikes have been. So it is a disgrace, really, that these people can stand up there and use language that is absolutely devoid of the truth, at the same time as expecting people to, in time, perhaps, you know, respond to a call to arms.
Yeah. Well, it's fraudulent in one sense, and you've got to say that since this is directly impacting on the safety, the defence of the nation, it's treasonous.
Yes.
Because if our defensive ability has been hollowed out, which it has, to such an extent that we cannot defend the nation, and people are doing that on the basis of lies or weasel words. Yeah. These are serious offences. Yeah. If we're going to war, and we know it's an unlawful war, but we're not doing anything, these are very serious things, and nobody, apart from new media, UK column is really holding them to book for this and saying, why is this happening? Yeah. On the subject of the capability of the military, I followed through on some X chains this morning, and this one popped up. I'm going to take it at face value. So it's from Plumber's Mate, whoever that is. Okay. He will know, or she will know. Right. It says, comes to something when we're reliant on the Greeks to defend us. Embarrassing. And I think that's a reference to the Greeks have sent some F-16 to Cyprus, I think, as a sort of show of solidarity. But what's in the X is a list of ships, of warships, British warships. And it's talking about basically days out of service. So if I just count through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 ships, and then the rest are submarines. So now some of them are in refit, in which case you get a lot of days out of service. There's a full refit takes 3 years for some big ships, but so we got 458 days out of service, but the ship is in refit. But then the next one, which happens to be the Prince of Wales, was 92 days in maintenance. That was back in November. We've then got HMS Daring, so this is one of the Type 45s, 3,196 days out of action. So that ship has, since it appeared, it was brand new, has never really functioned. The next one in red is 604 days, 960 days. So we go through the fleet, and when we get into the submarines, it's even worse, because we've got deep maintenance, which is a normal cycle. But if you haven't got enough vessels, then you can't cover the gaps when you're maintaining something. And one of them is laid up. So we haven't got the units in numbers, and also the maintenance periods seem to be extending, and we've got the example of a brand new ship which has effectively never proper gone to sea. And yet this has never been a major subject in the press. You've seen odd bits about it. But its breakdown, the system is, in my view, particularly for the Navy, is close to the breakdown. The ships are at sea, but are they really functioning? I'm not convinced.
Well, I wonder. I mean, actually interesting noting, I didn't realise that there was that tally there for the Prince of Wales, because, of course, Prince of Wales having only recently returned from the Indo-Pacific trade tour.
Well, that was the big thing, wasn't it?
Exactly,
The deployment.
Yeah. And now to be sent up to the high north, to the Arctic. So, of course, the amount of sort of gymnastic messaging that has to go on to make all of these things make sense at the same time is going to be something to behold, because is it really the case that the Prince of Wales, being, as reported on the news, being not a carrier strike group, but the carrier strike group, are they actually going to go up there or not now? Are they going to have to divert to somewhere rather warmer? And I mean, it's...
Charles, that's a really interesting one, because this was in my head, because initially I'm thinking, okay, so the action's out with Iran, and we're going to send them up to the frozen north. That's okay, it's cold, but that's a nice safe place for them to go. And so what is going on here is this actually not, I don't want to say propaganda in the first instance, but this is to do with image.
Yes.
We're making a big thing that the British carrier group with NATO units is going to go up north. This is image, when you would have thought if Iran was so dangerous, which is what they keep telling us, there would be the need to put our carrier out with the Americans. Why do I think they're not putting the carrier out with the Americans? Because they know it's dangerous. And by that, I'm talking about, have these ships really got the weapon systems to fight the missile systems they're going to be up against? The Americans are shaky, because the moment something's hypersonic, there isn't a defence against it. Whether that hypersonic capability is there against warships, we don't know. But if it is, there isn't a defence. And numbers in this game count. Now, the Americans can perform because they've got the number of ships, the number of missile launchers, the number of guns, and they've got everything they need in order to build the air picture. We do not have that.
No.
So I think there's even a possibility the Americans are happier being on their own. And I'm digressing a little bit, but
but necessarily so, because I think this is all the sort of stuff we should talk about.
I think admitted to having shot the two F-15s down,
three
down.
Yeah.
So I can imagine a lot of people will say, well, how did this happen? Well, it's happened because that's a really complex air environment, anti-air warfare environment, surveillance over a huge area, a whole lot of different countries involved who will want their say and their input in how things are doing, how things are to be done, and ultimately a huge number of aircraft airborne and on various missions, and a lot of people trigger happy because they're frightened. So the first thing I was thinking yesterday when I originally heard about the three F-15s was, that would have put a dent in the morale of the US pilots, because it's one thing flying into a dangerous zone where you're briefed on the weapon systems against you, but to then think, well, actually, I'm flying over friendly territory, but people are trigger happy, that's a whole different... And I can imagine that some of those pilots are really thinking, what have we got ourselves into here?
Yeah, I would have thought so.
So does the British carrier go out to Iran?
Well, this is it.
Go north?
But and you're right. I think propaganda, perhaps not quite the right word, is it? But this idea, it's all been about posturing.
Posturing, yeah.
And we've seen this now for years. of course. I mean, it's certainly not a new thing, but I think certainly since this time 4 years ago, as soon as the Russia-Ukraine conflict started, there has been a massive uplift in this, this notion of posturing, of trying to make it look like we are a sort of dominant, agile, powerful force. And in large part, that has been, with regard to Russia and Ukraine, it's always sounded very hollow, but nonetheless, they've sort of stuck with it. And this does seem to have been the latest part of it, the Arctic. In a way, it's hard to separate that from what has been happening, at least on the rhetoric side of it, from within the United States, particularly the push for Greenland, all the tariff stuff, Canada even coming under pressure, Venezuela, and going back to the sort of technate idea of the 1930s and that map overlaying almost exactly on all the territories that the Trump administration has been talking about. So it does sort of suit the British establishment to join in with some of that and to make out that not only that there is a threat from Russia, but that we have the wherewithal to do something about it, and we are going to do something about it. We're really standing up and being tough on this, that, and the other. I suppose the other thing, I mean, this is obviously pure speculation, but again, in terms of sort of selling the story, and in a way I'm thinking of the Falklands here, but the idea that you'd send the carrier up north only to then make a big sensationalist thing about turning around and saying, right, actually, we've got a job on, down in the Gulf. Because there will come a time, if is what we've talked about before, is where are the people coming from? It's one thing not having kit and serviceable ships and whatnot, but we need people as well. And so when the recruiting call goes out, or conscription, which is what we're absolutely speculating will happen in some form or other, you need a narrative to go along with that. And I think the sort of, the aircraft carrier or the strike group turning round because we've got an emergency and this, that, and the other. I mean, it's easy to see.
But you're putting it as far away from the conflict zone as you could.
Exactly. So yes, exactly. But this is the sort of the theatre of it, because exactly as you say, do they actually want to be involved in that?
You couldn't put it in a more out of the way place than go north.
No, quite.
Go north, young man.
Yeah.
And play in the frozen north. How long is it going to take you to get out to the Gulf? A long time. A long time,
by which time perhaps the aspiration is that there would have, whatever is going to go on there would have petered out. But it's very hard to see how this will go, and as I say, by the time this goes out, we'll be out of date. We'll be out of date by the end of today. Something will have happened.
Although my comment on today is that, early this morning when I went to have a check at what was being reported, and straight away I went to look at what was happening with Iran. Yeah. Very little being said.
Yes.
And I thought, that's very interesting after yesterday. Now, on one hand, the Americans might have decided that they need to go operationally quiet, but if you're, as Trump says, going to beat out of Iran, and we've got all of our best assets there, why are we now going? Why are we now going silent on the media front?
Yes,
and so is it going as well as they think?
Well, quite.
Maybe suspecting it isn't.
Yeah. Well, I think that would be a sort of a logical thing to think. Yeah. And I really do wonder. I mean, I think the other thing, again, looking further down the track, what is the intent insofar as Iran is concerned? Because I think the significant part of the equation will come to be China, or could come to be China. China and Iran have a meaningful and formal relationship, and China is Iran's top export destination. I mean, you know, the economic significance of the relationship between two countries is right there. At what point is China going to consider that that some sort of intervention is appropriate? You know, will that happen? I'm not suggesting militarily. That would seem, well, it seems incredibly improbable at the minute. But nonetheless, it's you know, it's there. It's hard to see that they would ignore it completely, or have ignored it completely. I mean, goodness knows what's gone on behind closed doors. But again, I don't really see anyone making any mention of that particularly.
No. And then we've had the Americans talk about taking out the Iranian Navy. That's been a statement made from them. And then who was it? Hegseth talking. You know, didn't say much, but it could be boots on the ground. And I'm thinking, Iran is a big country, and it's got a lot of people in it, and a lot of those people are well organised. How many troops are you thinking you're going to put on the ground? And I then found myself thinking, they actually don't know because they haven't thought this through. Colonel McGregor also picks up on this, or has picked up on this with the situation in Ukraine, saying they never planned for what winning looks like. They didn't know what they were actually aiming for. Yes. And I get the impression that this is the situation with Iran. It was all the gung-ho, let's get in there. And I think one of the faults with the Americans is that they believe their own rhetoric about the weapons systems and...
I think so. I absolutely agree. And then they put themselves in a position of having to live up to it. I think this is a really interesting point in a recent Silk and Steel podcast. Carl Zar had Warwick Powell on, the Australian, and he said he was on regularly, but he was making, I thought, a really interesting point. It was wider. It wasn't connected necessarily to the military, but the sort of sense of swagger that the United States creates around, frankly, everything it does means that they're making a rod for their back, because then they've got to live up to that. Whereas now, with reference to Iran effectively has nothing to prove. It's the Americans that do. So the moment there is an apparent vulnerability in the munitions side of it or something else, then they take the hit, both metaphorically and literally. Yeah. And I think this is not really considered. And again, on the sort of the way the administration characterizes itself and behaves, some people, particularly sort of supporters of Trump, might think that the way in which policy expresses itself, as in it is unpredictable and therefore, it's a winning formula and it's all the art of the deal and all this stuff. But actually, all it means is that other countries look at you as a liability because you are unpredictable and you are not the sort of the biggest kid on the block in a world sense, really, anymore at all. And do other countries really want to be aligned with an unpredictable and therefore vulnerable nation state? Probably not really. And I'm guessing, but I think even Starmer's run into this trap. Yes. And that's another reason why he's going down such a wobbly path, because the Americans are unstable. He doesn't know what they're actually going to do. Yeah. For me, I think the significance of these events in Iran, however they pan out, but America's world power for so many years has been, if we leave nuclear weapons out of it, their power has been based on air power from the aircraft carriers. And America has been able, over a great many years, to deploy huge numbers of aircraft into a theatre of operations. In many cases, certainly two carriers would be delivering more aircraft than many air forces own as a total thing. So they could bring those aircraft into theatre, and they had the ability to dominate the air environment
with surveillance and putting up the fighters and carrying out the attacks. This time it's different. For all of the bravado that it's a huge 100,000 ton, the latest aircraft carrier out there, Abraham Lincoln, the reality is that it's facing weapon systems which can destroy it. Now, whether the Iranians have got those systems, and in particular I'm saying hypersonic missiles or very fast missiles which are capable of engaging a target at sea, have the Iranians got those? We don't know. We may be about to find out. But if they have, one hit ends the American dream. There's no ifs or buts about it, because it says the era of the carrier is over. And I'm watching what's happening here, and I'm thinking, are we about to see a conflict where the whole nature of sea power is changed because the carriers demonstrated that, like the battleship, they've passed their prime.
Yes, one decisive action. Yeah, exactly.
And maybe we could say to the audience, I mean, it's serious stuff to go and look, but if you don't understand what I'm talking about, go and have a look at there's some very good YouTube documentaries on the Forrestal fire. And that was one of the American aircraft carriers that was fully armed up. So it had aircraft on deck, fueled and armed, ready for raids on Vietnam. A missile cooked off, hit another aircraft, fire started, bomb explosions, and they were very lucky they didn't lose the ship. A lot of bravery, so if we put a positive human element into it, the Forrestal fire was successfully fought, and they saved the ship, but a lot of people died. But the point I'm making is that aircraft carriers, if they're operating aircraft, are not only a huge target, they are full of ammunition and aviation fuel, which is a really unfortunate combination.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to see what's going to happen on this.
Yeah.
But if the one of our carriers does go out there, nobody should be under any illusion they will be regarded as a second-rate player by the Americans.
Yes.
They will be given a role, but the thing which I think is increasingly obvious is that there is now disrespect from the Americans for not only UK's political performance, but also military performance. And I think the carrier would be given a specific role over there.
Yes.
Obviously, there's got to be some form of command and control integration and building the air picture. But essentially, the Brits won't be seen as the saviour in that theatre. I think the Americans could regard them as another nuisance they'd rather not deal with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to what we sort of started talking about, really, which is considering the British administration's point of view. I mean, really, what are they thinking? I mean, how are they expecting to come out of this with anything intact, really? Whether that be political reputation or military integrity, because we're extremely vulnerable militarily, and therefore to become involved in this would most likely lead to seriously bad outcomes, and therefore, where's the benefit at all in doing that, unless you really are going to use that to do what it is we've talked about before, which is to enter into a much bigger conflict of some sort that requires conscription, that requires this whole of society approach that, of course, all the various papers that came out last year have been pointing towards, and that this is really going to be the point from which the economy is destroyed once and for all, and that we begin the whole process of rebuilding via some ghastly digital infrastructure and living off some sort of, universal benefit. I mean, is this really the beginning of that? Well, I don't know. But if it isn't, then for Starmer and his entourage, there are some massive questions to ask as to how far they want to go with making it look like either they are or they aren't involved in it, because I think the potential fallout from this, both in a political, economical, and military context, is potentially horrific.
Yeah.
So one really does wonder, and as discussed, I'm not suggesting that they really do hold the power, that they are ultimately making the decisions, but nonetheless they are the people sort of with their sticker on the tin, and therefore they've got to say and do something. So what are they going to say and do, and how is this going to work for the so-called defense or the war industry? I think there are a lot of things to come, and also the sort of oil, the oil shock and whatnot. How will that actually take effect, not just in this country, but across the non-oil producing countries and whatnot? I mean, there's many things I think that may well fall out of this, or not. Or is this? Does it in any way present a moment where a different outcome can be pursued? I mean, I can't think of any reason why. History does not suggest that we are going to do the sensible thing. I don't know.
We'll see. The bit I was thinking about is that these are serious events and they're on a very big scale, but a lot of it is theatre.
Yes.
In what's happening on a global scale. It's very cruel theatre because the people, the people conducting the play or directing the play, they don't care about the casualties.
No.
But whatever these massive events, and we could go back to COVID, COVID happening, or the Ukraine war, now we've got Iran. The global policies continue. And I think if Ben was with us now, he would be saying this is one of the interesting things, that whatever the turbulence on the face of the earth, the wars, the rumours of wars, we've got a policy which is driving through, which is doing a number of things which never change. It's dragging nation states of the world into the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. It's absolutely locking them into everything to do with climate change. We want to believe that. And then it's also clearly breaking down societies in a traditional sense and introducing what we could call a new liberal form, which is actually hostile to the history and the national identity of many countries. So the wars, Ukraine is there with all the turbulence and the breakup, and now we've got Iran. But this is not stopping the flood of these policies which said, well, actually, you're not going to exist as a nation state anymore. You're going to be part of, could be an international trade, or it could be part of the European Union. And every time I'm looking at that picture, I come back to the Trilateral Commission agenda, which is that the nation states of the world are to be divided into three power blocks. So the Americas, Europe, which includes Africa, and then Asia, the Asian states. And so Ukraine, to me, is an obvious part of this, because what is it? What were they actually trying to do? They were trying to draw Ukraine into Europe, which gives it the whole of the key European land mass. And then we had the conundrum, which is that Asia is deemed to start to the east of the Ural Mountains. So the implication was Europe will take Russia to the Ural Mountains, and the rest of it is Asia, and that forms the Asian bloc, which is everything: China, India, Japan, all put into that Asian bloc. So we've got the Americas, we've got Europe and Africa, and then we've got Asia. And to me, it just seems more and more obvious that this is where the politics is going. So when Trump gaily said, well, I need to take over Canada and I'm going to get stuck into Venezuela, and if there's any other countries down south, we're going to deal with them, that to me fits that trilateral agenda.
It does. I mean, absolutely it does. I suppose the thing that's very hard to get to is at what point the psychopathy and greed of various people involved in making these decisions actually becomes an obstacle to their own progress. You know, how many people are actually going to find when it comes to it that they are really united in supporting
those agendas.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because I don't know. I mean, the way I look at it is that actually, greed and psychopathy are what enable people to have these sorts of ideas in the first place. But then actually, ultimately, they will become competitors amongst one another. I mean, I can't necessarily substantiate that, but yes, I mean, it will be very interesting to see. And again, I think I would say with specific regard to Africa, which is always the sort of not silent partner. That's the wrong. But there's so little is ever really said of Africa. It's still now somewhere that is in relative terms, little understood and little discussed, and but also again in relative terms, sort of little interfered with. I mean, it's that is a very rapidly changing picture because all the countries that we have been talking about absolutely have interests in Africa, but I think not to quite the same degree, or at least the ability to exert control over Africa is still not quite what they would sort of aspire for it to be. So it will be very interesting. I mean, yes, I mean, even in the context of what we're discussing now with the situation in Iran, what will be the African response to this? I mean, geographically, certainly North African countries and the Horn of Africa is not at all, not just not far, but actually certainly militarily strategic.
They feel engaged in the arena.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's that is a very interesting one. I mean, in fact, because of course the Red Sea part of that, the United States, Russia, and China are all very much involved in that sort of around the Horn, Djibouti and Eritrea, and that bit of north, the Somaliland coast as well. Very, very, very topical and in a way very much related to this. So there will be, I think, we would be well advised to watch that area too, for a whole host of reasons. But no, I mean, that's a very interesting point about the Trilateral Commission. And as you say, the fact that these things can occur, but at no point does any of the sort of bigger agenda appear to be derailed.
Yeah.
In some senses, sort of as absurd as it sounds, net zero is as important today as it was last week.
Yeah.
Well, why?
Why? Because it's a key agenda. I have complained over many years about, I'm going to say, the performance of senior military officers when you try and engage them with some of the things going on, and you try and warn them about some things happening, because it became clear to me pretty quickly that many of them clearly didn't know much in sort of areas. But then when I tried to engage with them, there was an inherent arrogance, which meant they didn't want to engage. And so eventually I gave up that line. If you look across military people as we'll call it a big club, it's obvious that, and you can see this over social media, that certainly amongst veterans, there are a lot of vets who are now really changing their view of the world and how they see it. And I personally think that's very encouraging. My question to you, because you're that much younger than I am, so your connectivity with the military is much more recent than I am. But do you see any signs that people in the military are beginning to think to themselves, something's not right? What's going on? What are we involved in?
Yes.
Is that there somewhere or not?
I think so. Yeah, I think it really is. I wonder, again, it's very hard to be objective about this. That will have existed to a certain point always, but I think the degree to which it is considered now or even expressed, I think is on the increase. And okay, again, on the sort of documented evidence of that, I think there have been more reports, in as much as one can ever really give them credence, because as you and I well know, anything that ever goes into the mainstream press about any kind of military activity, operation, whatever, is I would say 95% absolute rubbish. So we take it with lorry loads of salt, but nonetheless, there are, I would say consistently, there are more and more reports about sorts of behaviours and outcomes that I think wouldn't have happened 30, 40 years ago, particularly concerning sort of discipline issues and that kind of thing. And when I say discipline, I don't just mean people being sort of naughty boys. I mean people doing stuff that is actually subversive or in the face of what they're being directed to do. So I think that's quite significant. Anecdotally, yes. I mean, those people that I am still in touch with who are either still serving or have been recently, I get a very strong sense that people are very cognizant of a lot of what we've been talking about. Certainly on the internal side, I think it's very obvious, I think, from within that your ability to do your job properly as a soldier, sailor, or airman is being frustrated all the time. The government, the Ministry of Defence, they are not on your side. That the way in which the conditions are set for you to try and operate are just deteriorating, and that looks deliberate. And actually, as an example of that, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day involved in procuring a new helicopter, and I will respect his sort of confidence and therefore not say very much about it, except to say that it is highly likely that that a procurement project for a new helicopter will go the wrong way insofar as something that is substandard will be bought because there has been political pressure applied and the view of those that actually know has been pushed to one side. I mean, that is absolutely shocking because, of course, as I said to him, well, so how does that work? Because further down the track, you've got the audit trail that says, well, we recommended this, that and the other, and we were ignored. And then someone gets shot down or it blows up or whatever happens. And well, right, so who made that decision then? Yeah. And yet those things are actually happening.
And obviously when people speak to you at that level, you have to respect confidences. So I'm just having a guess here. But of course, the moment we started to get away from our own nation-based production and we started particularly to mix it with the European Union and the pan-European projects, we ended up in this terrible mess because it is more difficult to produce a project jointly with another nation or group of nations.
Yes.
There's all sorts of little niggling things that come to the surface. Yeah. And each nation, they may be fully committed to NATO, and you would think they would therefore see the same threats and require the same specifications. But each national characteristic affects those requirements in what they want. And then you end up with this compromise. Tornadoes was definitely one of those aircraft. Yeah. If we go back a few years, and we've also seen it in the production of helicopters. So my guess is that this will be the European politics. Could be America trying to sell us something, but the drive seems to be to to build in-house in Europe at the moment. So I would guess it's European politics.
Yes. Well, I think the other dimension to that, I mean, there's two elements. One, and I think this is a thing, it's a theme through so much, not just military kit, but because so much, I mean, virtually everything now is digitized and has sort of remote control capabilities or autonomous capabilities and whatnot. In actual fact, you design, procure, buy, whatever, you get hold of the kit, but actually you don't really ever have full control of it. And that is a picture that is complicated, exactly like you say, by a multinational sort of build, but also the fact that there are not just other companies holding the proprietary technology and still able to sort of deal with something remotely and examine the data or whatever. There are a huge number of vulnerabilities there insofar as the data, but also the control is concerned. But it's also, who where are those companies based? And the obvious one, and this goes back to, again, the sort of anecdotal discussions I've had with either serving or sort of recently serving personnel, is the spectre of Israel, and because so much of this technological background sort of platforms come from Israel, and a lot of our kit now is made to be functional by Israeli bits kit. Now that is a problem, and certainly again, from having talked to people, there is absolutely an acknowledgement that what that state has been allowed to do now, with the absolutely active support of the United States, is utterly wrong. So, if bearing in mind what is looking likely to happen now with regard to Iran, it is very significant that there are a lot of people serving in the armed forces now who consider that the actions of Israel, in particular, over the last 2.5 years, have been
unacceptable.
Well, absolutely, and more. And so if we're looking like we're going to be drawn into something that is in effect to preserve the existence of the state of Israel, well, that is going to get people thinking and talking.
Yeah.
And so I think, this is going to be a big thing for the Starmer administration to think about. Because I personally think he's fully involved in relations with the Israeli state. I like to say this straight away, because we're getting onto territory that's really important, but it's very emotional to lots of people. But if I go back, certainly, let's make it the 20 years before I got involved with the UK column. So I'd been through my military career. I'd been through a short career in civilian life. And I was aware the Jewish community were in this country, but that was where it ended. Yeah. And I can't even say that I remember meeting anybody, and I did on occasions meet people who I then discovered were Jewish, but that didn't come to the fore as a key issue. You met them and dealt as an individual. But it was only later, as I started to learn and see things which previously I didn't see, that I started to pay attention to this business about Israel not over there as an independent nation. I've got to put nation state, and of course we're going to get people, but Israel over there as a country. Let me try that one to describe it. I was then looking at the power base of Israel inside this country, but still not really paying attention to it. And one of the first occasions where I really started to think was in a conversation with Alex Thompson, and I know this is on record, where he said that when he was at GCHQ, he was surprised that so much material was shared with Israel. Right. And so, within the top level caveats used, obviously national security, nobody else sees it apart from the nation state. But after that, US, UK material, absolute top of the tree.
And then as the numbers come in Canada or Australia, the grade of the material invariably reducing. But then it emerged that we're just sharing stuff with Israel. On what basis? And this is before we'd got Francis Maud announcing in whatever it was, 2014, that we were going to be integrating intelligence services and universities with Israel and their security agency, Unit 8200. But once I'd started to follow along this path, you begin to really say, well, who's actually calling the shots?
Yes. No, I know. And yeah, I mean, I would totally agree. It's not something that well, I mean, there was absolutely nothing sort of above the surface, really. There was no sense that that Israel had a sort of significant
finger in the pie.
No,
but it is now coming to the surface.
Oh my goodness,
it's becoming more
absolutely
and more
it is,
obvious.
and that is absolutely a dovetailed operation, and I think we've seen, the popular response to what happened on October the 7th, 2023 shows how incredibly effective the ownership, the perceived ownership of Judaism and Jewish people worldwide has been conducted by the state of Israel, whereas previously I don't think, and again, everybody will have to speak for themselves, but certainly I never spoke to anyone Jewish who gave me the slightest impression that the state of Israel had any influence or impact on their life or their faith or their view of the world.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, they happen to have some direct link with that country, like anywhere else. I mean, if you're a Roman Catholic, okay, I'm not. In fact, I won't go down that route because there isn't really an overlap. But the point is that just because there are 3/4 roughly Jews in the state of Israel, why does that mean that country claims ownership of Jewish people worldwide? I mean, but the way in which that sort of media campaign was conducted, I think below the surface has obviously been terrifically effective, because look at how people, not everybody, but look at how so many people have responded. And just going back to I was flying through Aberdeen on Sunday. I picked up a copy of the Scottish Sun on Sunday, just to read about, what they were going to say about what had just happened in Iran. First few pages, the way that the Sun would write stuff up. It wasn't long before we were into sort of which celebrity had got stranded in Dubai. But the important point was that what they wrote was that you're on the wrong side of history if you're not supporting this, and if you're not supporting Israel's. I mean, I can't remember if they used the word self-defense again, but that was the line from the tabloid press. Yeah. I mean, it was quite staggering, and I can't think that would have been in a newspaper 20 years ago.
No, well, I certainly don't think.
Yeah, so it is a really significant change, and again, in light of what we were just talking about, which is the ownership of the technology that enables so many of these sophisticated weapon systems that we are either making use of or going to make use of or purchasing. I think all those things, they are connected, and that is significant and relevant.
And we've got the other factor which is coming in. It's coming in across a lot of products in the civilian world, but for the military it's significant, and that is that equipment's being provided which the military is not going to own. It's going to be on lease from the production company.
Yeah.
And so you then say, well, the ultimate control over that aircraft or that missile system is going to be with the production company, the company that's produced it.
No, and this is exactly it. And I think what I would like to talk about in a future discussion is space, because this is exactly sort of where we're going with space. I'm writing about it at the minute. I must get it finished. But the NASA project, there's all this sort of stuff about the moon now. The current Artemis project has 2,700 companies joined up delivering this project. I mean, how does that work? It is
Well, how does it work? It's probably going to produce chaos to some extent,
yes.
but on the other hand, all of these companies are drawn into a line we could call it a political line or a policy line.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the picture. But we shouldn't worry, should we? Because King Charles under his Carter Astra.
Oh, his Astra Carter.
Carter, got it. It's got it all under control. And and of course we now have a space specialist space section for the RAF, don't we?
We do.
So they've got space under control, Charles.
Well, so it seems, big business anyway, to be discussed in future.
Yeah.
But yes, well, anyway, Brian, I mean, I think we've brought out some, in as much as we can, this sort of soon into it, but I think we've brought out some interesting points of consideration for
hopefully we've touched on some things and people are thinking, what did they say?
Exactly.
Or what are they talking about? That's a good thing, because
it really is. Yeah.
People need to be delving into this.
Absolutely. Especially where you started with the, the lawfulness of war. I mean, that is one big topic.
Absolutely. And all right, we'll save the rest of it for next time. But I hope that Iran, they've had the attacks. I hope there's some winding back on this.
And absolutely.
I think there's a possibility that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's dreadful.
It is dreadful. Yeah. No. We obviously that's what we hope for. I mean, crikey, that's really what this is all about. De-escalation, peace,
and keeping some sanity.
Keeping some sanity. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.